Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we will be listening to the 8th part of What If Deku Didn't Believe All Might and Remained Quirkless. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 15, the first course, so basically canon. Because canon proved Izuku is a BAMF without quirks. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. They had to line up. The order was done purposefully to give the general education kids a chance of not coming last. In a sprint it would have been in their best interest, but when facing the corridor that barely held 20 for a long distance run, unless they were fast and could keep the speed, it was useless. It might even save the hero kids, not being in the rush. Bruises and fighting to get through the pathway would tire someone out. It was perfectly hidden in disguise, the first obstacle. The entryway would knock the hundreds into just under 70 who still had an equal odd. Izuku slipped into a running stance and beside him Shinsu did the same. None of their classmates had reached the conclusion they had. The pair received looks of confusion but couldn't bring themselves to care. Their peers could fall behind. None of them radiated the need for heroics or the desperation of having an insane friend with babies. They watched the countdown. Red, it still hadn't swapped like the annoying traffic lights that never seemed to change. Orange, the change to green which let them sprint would come any second now. 3 seconds was the average a stop was orange for. UA would know that and use it to their advantage. It switched to green. Izuku bolted. He elbowed the competitors in front of him and screeched into the tunnel. There was no time for him to hesitate. Hero students would end them all, and if he had to make a guess, he would say he had 4 seconds before it became impossible for him to pass. The sports festival was known for the time you couldn't hold back your punches. Right now, he was the biggest threat to everyone, being safety in first place. Everyone else was already squabbling at the back and getting through in their own special ways. He would be lying if he said that Shinsu crowd surfing wasn't the smartest dick move he had ever seen. He didn't know what was. Ice began to creep up his leg and Izuku already knew he was done for unless there was some miracle. He might wish that people didn't bother, but no one knew his name other than his friends. The cause of the ice wouldn't leave him out. There was no way he could outrun it. He was fast from outrunning Kikin, but not that quick unless he timed a jump perfectly or ran back onto the ice that had formed previously. Mayhatsum would kill him. The inventor might drag him out and pass the first obstacle for the sake of him giving her another chance to show off in rescue. There wasn't enough odds in that though. He watched as the ice started to coat his leg and bury him. He jumped as the last wave set. He slid on the frozen water as if he was wearing ice skates before pushing himself up. Izuku didn't have time for stupid slips like that. No matter how funny it would be on camera. He pushed on the substance and made use of the friction it had against his shoes to slide rather than run. It reminded of the times in winter, in fluffy socks, he would dance round the wooden floorboard while calling his mum to watch him. He hadn't slipped since he was 7 and he refused to fall now. The skill was coming in handy as schemed over what remained of the arena with little effort. The first place position had been stolen by a boy with red and white hair. Distantly, he recognized him as Shouto Todoroki. He landed on the gravel as other hero students worked past. Eureka had made the use of her newfound ability to float as she slid on the ice that remained out of the tunnel. She landed in a jog beside Izuku and grinned when she looked past him before continuing on her way. A girl with a frog tongue hopped past them all on all fours like when they used to play leapfrog. Kikin, his explosions instantly made use of releasing him from the icy prison that the youngest Todoroki had made. The 5 students had crossed quickest so far, but Izuku slowly lost his lead to them all. The training they had done paid off. He continued with the jog as more of 1A passed him. One girl rode a motorbike as if it was part of her. And Itsu was sprinting the gaps in between, making use of his engines. A girl with earphones was creating mini explosions in the ground to power her forward where she couldn't use her quirk physically. Others were jogging alongside him. Physical fitness was just as important as quirks, it seemed. Izuku did notice that the kids who he recognized all could have avoided or broke out of the quirk. Because a tunnel isn't already hard enough to escape from when children are in a middle school fight, add the most overpowered quirk he has ever seen into the mix. Shinsu should have come out assuming he crowd surfed the whole time. There wasn't time to waste by looking for him though. His belief would have to be enough. He couldn't see the hints of purple, but amongst all the contenders now coming out, he would be hard to spot. Izuku focused on the incoming obstacle on hand, the robot. He didn't recognize it, but the description matched what the hero course were meant to have fought. There was no way he would have made it through then or now. The mechanics might be easy to take down once he knew the layout. He didn't have that privilege though, and in a real fight neither would the heroes. Fortunately, being out of his depth was an everyday when the world isn't built for but built for quirks that should be capable of taking down these lumps of metal. How did UA even get permission to bring these into a national event with no one on standby? The swings it could get in were fatal. Taking it down would cause a death. It may have focused on problem solving in all the courses, but this was extreme. Izuku pulled away and let the hero students deal with this. They all seemed to have been pulled into a halt at the sight of an old foe. All of their quirks should have been made for this, yet the lives held them back. Had UA patted the safeguarding on the back with the promise that these kids had the power to take it down before leaving? He would have to Google that later. Right now he had a bigger issue. The metal was being taken care of by the same unstoppable force they had dealt with a round before. Ice limited its movements and frozen the inner workings. People used this to take their move at getting past. With no fear of being hit, Kaken blew himself into the air while Eureka proved to him why she held the record at her school for high jump. Izuku began to run through as well. With no skip in his step. The clutter would collapse on them soon. Face forward, anyone should be able to see it coming and save their life unless they were already under it. Other than himself, only 2 over kids had attempted to run. While he aimed for the arms, so it would fall and miss him, the 2 boys were under the brunt. It was toppling over and the once hero hopeful wanted to help them. That would result in 3 deaths. He had to be logical about this and assume they were in a position where this was safe. If proven wrong, the robots on the opposite ends of the gates should help. They would cancel the sports festival. The health and safety must have gone through this. In an emergency, he needed to back off and save himself. This counted as an emergency as he made the home stretch and flipped round to make sure the 2 boys were okay. Izuku watched the metal crashed on the floor, burying the 2 deep within. They should be intestines, crushed. The thought horrified him. The kids on the other side had stopped to see what they would do. Why weren't the robots moving forward mechanically to make sure he was okay? They just bobbed around expecting the kids to reemerge. Present Mike called something into the microphone as the audience stopped cheering. The whole sports festival drew to a halt as they expected the message that they had lost 2 heroes hopefuls to play through. Not for the first head to force itself through the metal and scream, if that had been anyone else they'd be dead. The loudspeaker announced what just happened, Tetsu of Class 1B. He's one to look out for. His quirk allows him to turn himself into metal at will. He must have activated it to escape. And coming out now is. There was silence as more bangs pressed adjacent the metal. The start of hair formed in the metal. Red hair popped through first before a stretch of red hair spat out a metal cog. Blood. Anyone else and they'd be dead. He said, looking at the groups he had stood around to make sure he was okay. The kid smiled at them all and gave a thumbs up. And that. Present Mike screeched, was Kiri's Hime of Class 1A. His quirk, hardening, allows him to harden any part of his body. The crowds whispered at 2 kids having such similar quirks and the potential of familial ties. Izuku didn't have the time to pay attention. He continued his jog round the field, completing another 1,000 meters before he reached the second official obstacle. The announcement on what it was must have come when Todoroki first came along. The first rope was coated with ice while he stood in the center looking lost. Quirk overuse was the most likely cause and he didn't know how to continue. Izuku could work with that. He took 1 foot on the line and felt for the elastic energy stored in the bands. There was none. It didn't fall with his weight, meaning these were more like metal pipes and could hold several people. Izuku could push people off and be pushed off by others. Both were likely ends to his fate. There was also likely a netting down there to catch them in case they fell. The drop was too large to see the bottom, making it perfect to use the fear to drive the competitors on. Those who failed to keep their cool to think logically would chicken out. Izuku couldn't afford to be them. However, his balance was one of a kind. When you had 2 left feet, a misstep was bound to happen. That only gave him with 2 options. One was to hunt Eureka and persuade her to use her quirk to help him. The other was to hitch a ride with Hatsume and pray her inventions didn't fail her then. Okako had vanished into thin air. She had no reason to hesitate the leap and was probably halfway through space as he stood. May could have been anywhere. The pink-haired support student would realize that he needed her help here. Looking around, there was no sight or sound of her. That was a giveaway that he was further ahead than he thought he was. Calling her would give the game away. Shinsu wouldn't be the only person using others, and if Mei could get a hero student's attention, she would take it. Izuku wasn't in the contest to win anyways. He just had to place past the first round. He stepped away from the edge and waited in the midst of the crowds. People were rushing into the canyon as if it was a beam. The girl got off her motorcycle to vault over, and the earphone girl slipped but gripped on thanks to the cables. Almost everyone had been rendered quirkless if they lacked innovation. Half of them fell. A boy decided trying wasn't even worth it and went straight for the bottom of the cliffs. He jumped down, not even attempting to grasp at the ropes. I don't think Yue would have made suicide on live television that easy. Shinsu drawled from beside him. Izuku flipped round to look at his friend in shock. The purplenet smirked. You were just standing there and I figured I should tell you there's a net. Jumping when you're quirkless and in general education? That's a one-way ticket to Hound Dog's office, and I don't think I gave up on live TV is going to save you. If anything, I think that will wind up with you in an asylum, so don't try anything, bud. Just stand here and look lost. Midoriya almost did a spit take. His face reddened and his feet shifted to move him further away than he already was. I wasn't going to jump. He reassured. I figured out there was a net. I wouldn't jump. Not now anyways. I'm looking for Mei. Have you seen her? Please, we have to make it. Is it worth ditching her? Hitachi smirked. First name basis already? He teased. It earned him a jab in the gut. It's quicker to yell Mei in an explosion than Hatsum. Have you seen her? Yeah, she was just behind me last time I checked. Trying to get a hoverboard working. Shinsu explained as he headed towards the ropes. I'd rather risk this than whatever she has though. I'll see you in the next round, Izu. Midoriya nodded. I'll see you next round. Then he was off, hopping past the wires with the balance he had gained through training. Izuku waited until he saw the first splodge of pink hair in the crowds. He waved his hands in the air. The action was eccentric enough to earn him the attention he needed. The girl swiveled around in his direction. You need a ride across the arena? She asked, offering her hand for him to take. He didn't hesitate to take it and pull himself onto the board and cling on tight. There isn't enough room on the board for him to sit, and as they rise in the air his fear takes full swing. Hatsum may be cackling into the wind like a wicked witch, but Izuku is screaming. His hands wrap around her waist for some semblance of control as they are at a height that doesn't risk them crashing into others. The inventor pulls her goggles down and turns. Izuku, I'm about to broadcast what this baby is, so can you please shut up? Midoriya nods. He forced his mouth to clamp down. The screeches gave up once they had nowhere to go. He still shook with fear, and he found himself clinging on tighter in fear her voice would startle him. Mei taps her microphone and began to announce what was going on. You all see this baby here? This is the hoverboard designed by Hatsum Mei. That's HATSUMEMEI. Of Support Course 1F. It holds 2 people as demonstrated by my wondrous partner Izuku Midoriya of 1C. It can go up to 100 feet, and this is prototype 1. Send an email to hatsumindustries@email.com if you're interested in the final product. That's hatsumindustries@email.com if you are interested in the finished product. We are currently traveling at 30 miles per hour, but this baby goes up to 150 miles per hour. Perfect for capturing villains with a speed quirk. We are going at 1/5 of this potential. This child of mine has lots to show yet. Mei flipped the switch off and turned back to Izuku. The boy clung to her as if his life depended on it. It probably did. Did you consider adding railings? He joked. She took it seriously. The megaphone was flipped back on. Izuku has suggested we add safety rails to the design. If you wish for me to remove them for your version, please include that in your email to hatsumindustries@email.com. The hoverboard fluttered to a stop as they reached the end of the canyon. The two both climbed off. Midoriya bowed at Hatsum while the girl climbed on her knees to dismantle the equipment. He didn't wait for her. She could receive his endless thanks when they were both across the finish line. Izuku broke out into a light jog across the field. The screams of the audience and present mixed cheers meant that someone had just passed the finishing line. He wasn't disheartened. The first person across would be a literal ice machine who had trained since birth. He kept pushing forward. He smiled a little at Eraserhead's comment that we should have seen this coming. Todoroki is a powerhouse even if the only thing he did was create a glacier. Midoriya needed to come in the top 40 to get through. He could still see most people pushing for the finish line. He had to be in the top 20 so far. His inability to freeze the arena shouldn't hold him back even if it sent Todoroki Shoto sliding across the finish line. He could see the end in sight. It couldn't be that easy. The speed in which everyone was moving screamed that something was wrong. The lumps in the ground they were avoiding gave him enough to work with. The finale event being drowned out by someone's screeches wouldn't slow him down. Izuku's theory was proven correct when one of the frog girls set off an explosion with a simple misstep. It wasn't enough to kill them obviously, but scare them into setting off more and giving them burns just like the ones that dotted his skin. It was a cruel tactic, but one he had seen before. Fear causes you to make mistakes, which is why you had to get the first hit before a hate crime. It sent the message that you wouldn't be pushed around out. People didn't like it when you fought back. Explosions were his best friend and worst enemy. They had to be the first thing to ever harm him, but he knew how they worked. He couldn't watch Kiken learn how to fly from up a tree and not know exactly what the best course of action was. Izuku Midoriya triggered a landmine and propelled himself with it. The soles of his feet burned. It was hot, too hot, and his skin would be red and reeling. He landed another landmine and kept going. Each time using every second he was forced airborne to move forward. Midoriya couldn't hear anything over the bangs, pops and his own heartbeat. He could only see red, the pink his arms were well acquainted with. Bakugo's explosions were going at his feet. He had taken his shoes and destroyed the soles. They kept coming and he should be running out of sweat soon. Kiken should have ran out of nitroglycerin ages ago, so why was it still burning? Izuku snapped back to life as he face-planted across the fence line onto grass. He scampered back, ignoring the only two people to cross the finish line so far. His feet were bleeding. Blood was splattered from where he had burnt the flesh away. The grass grated against his baby skin. Midoriya couldn't move. It hurt too much. He lay there watching as the next few people crossed the line with ease. Yurika was the only of his friends who passed. She wandered over to him, despite her face being green with nausea. "Do you need me to get recovery, girl? The whole track's been marked and even present Mike seemed worried for your back." Midoriya didn't feel pain at his back. He placed a hand there to see if he could feel the rawness. It stung when he traced a circle, but no more than the time Kiken tried to use him as an aim for makeshift explodey balls, as he called them. His PE kit had been torn up. "I think I need her, but my feet." He pointed down to them and Yurika nodded, clearly seeing the issue there. "I'll go grab recovery girl early. They should have recorded my place, so stay right there." She scrambled off in the direction of the infirmary. He stayed on the ground. It was when he looked up that he noticed Katsuki Kiken Bakugo staring at him like a lamb to slaughter. Izuku Deku Midoriya made the mistake of staring back, refusing to accept the fate life had planned for him. He was going to recovery girl with more than just the burns on his back. Izuku need more than a kiss. He needed a funeral director, and fast. Chapter 16, Preparation. Izuku couldn't get out of the infirmary slow enough. Outside that door was childhood friend. Kiken would be vibrating with excitement at the prospect of having his punching bag back. Midoriya's feet were stuck on the floor. Recovery girl stood by him waiting for him to leave. He couldn't bring his feet to move. The skin had cleared up and replaced itself. Walking didn't hurt, and the stare he received proved Joe wouldn't buy it either. He took a deep breath and prayed it would stop his stammering heart as he pulled his foot up and round in the walk cycle. The repetitive motion used all his energy to keep up. It was taking too long to do, but he could pass it off as shock. In the past, injuries like this would leave him stumbling for days. Recovery girl had healed most of his fresh scars. The movement would be freeing if his body hadn't become lead. Izuku pulled the door open and peeked round the corner. The Pomeranian was nowhere in sight. His body loosened at the realization that he wasn't going to be stumbling back in there mere seconds later. Even if the case wouldn't be the whole day. Bakugo knew to look for him. He knew to make sure he got a hit, and once that boy was on a mission, it had to be dragged from his cold dead hands. Midoriya had to avoid the screams of Deku in the next event. He had been bullied for years, but the explosion still made him flinch. Burnt flesh wasn't something he ever wanted to catch a whiff of after the sports festival ever again. Caramel was ruined. The sticky substance smelled too much like the other boy. It was something to be avoided, yet the hallways all reeked of it. Just keep walking. It doesn't smell of Kiken, was Izuku's mantra. A simple whiff was enough to send him reeling and near toppling over the edge of coherent thoughts. He had escaped for so long and now it was crashing down. Bakugo had seen him. His bully had seen him. There was no sign of him stalking the hallways. The caramel couldn't bin him. Midoriya's brain demanded an explanation. With a second of intense thinking he reached the conclusion. It smelled like endeavor. That wasn't nitroglycerin. It was a campfire that burned a house down. Whatever the number 2 was doing down there was none of his business. He wanted to intrude and maybe get an autograph. There was a bigger fish to fry. That was making sure Shinsu and Mei crossed the finish line in time to make the cut for the next round. He had no doubt they crossed in a good position, but was it good enough? He hoped so. Izuku pushed open the door to see the remaining competitors. The 40 or so he didn't make the cut had been banished into a crowd of stalls. The hero classes were closed. No one sat there, just as expected. If they hadn't made the cut, the Eraserhead would have kicked them out for sure. Expulsion was a real threat for 1A. Looking around, he couldn't see any of those he passed missing, but 2 kids were missing to make the grand total of 40. 2 had already been kicked out. He hoped Shinsu had also noticed, because that could be vital in him transferring. The purple mop already stood in the crowd. He stood beside Eureka because he knew no one else. The pair was avoid Mei as if their life depended on it. Izuku couldn't blame them. Being scared shitless would be the natural response to the girl who laughed at the face of explosions. He could see her as well. The goggles stood out more than he would have expected. Everyone avoiding her by a meter could also have something to do with it. The ostracization barely made her blink. She stared at the panel waiting for midnight to come and announce what the next event was. If the empty stage didn't have her full attention, then one her of babies did. Only Hatsum would have brang in spare parts in case something broke. Izuku snuck up beside her and wedged himself into her side. The next event should start in a few minutes. I was the last one I saw in the infirmary, he said, peering over her shoulder to grab a view of what she was currently fiddling with. Well, of course. You make the 40th student here, Izuku. They couldn't start without you, but the crowds were being restless. They only calmed down at 30 of us because they thought it wouldn't take too long. Then second place comes out screaming about some quirkless Deku and the crowd goes crazy all over again. Twitter becomes a storm and the hashtag who's Deku starts trending because everyone at home and in the crowds wants to find out who this dude is. At some point some dumbass realizes it's you and publicly shares it. My self-made phone starts to ping like mad because our accounts being linked. At this point, if all of our DMs aren't apologies for his actions or you being mocked, I would be shocked. Either way, their self-made excitement has been wrecked and they need entertainment. She explained, not even looking up from the tinker toy she had in her hands. I couldn't have been gone for that long. Midoriya stammered. He didn't remember passing out at any time. How had so much happened and why was she so calm? Hatsum shrugged. They're here for kids to beat each other up. If anything, they want to see you and MR second place fight. There's already some guy who wants to see you fuck, and if there isn't a Wattpad fanfiction, I'll let you off helper duty for a month. Either way, sitting bored with nothing to talk about, it must be driving their puny brains insane. We literally just had the first event. How are they already bored? Puny brains need constant stimulation and don't have anything smart to do it for. Nothing new to tweet, so they won't tweet. In fact, it's either they rot from boredom or hate on you. I know which one I would prefer. They rot from boredom. Izuku answered. That got her to place the mini baby, a fetus, she would call it, down. She looked up to face him. No, I'd rather they drop dead than ever insult you, because no one hurts Hatsum Industries' first worker and gets away with it. She stated as if it was a fact of life. Midoriya looked at her as if it was the first time he ever heard something nice about himself. His chest felt light because even though Eureka and Shinsu made a variety of threats, neither would up on it. Mei definitely would. She spotted Midnight and nudged Izuku. Wanna see how far I'd go for you? No. Okay then. She sighed and slipped the toy back in her pocket. I made that bomb specifically for that purpose, but one days I'll find a way to use it. She didn't have more time to continue complaining as Midnight climbed onto the stage. The screen behind her lit up, the wheel began to spin again as she stepped out of the way to get the best view possible. The second round of the UA Festival first year stage is. She waited as the spinning slowed down before it drew to a stop. The letters threw up on the board, allowing everyone below to read them. A cavalry battle with the top 40 qualifiers. she announced, grinning while looking down at the children in front of her. Their confused faces were the exact reason, she announced. It was always worth it in the end, when their faces were crushed at the realization they were losing from the start. Especially when paired against those who were confirmed to be stronger. Those at the top will suffer more. You'll hear this many times as you attend UA. This is what Plus Ultra means. Nemuri screamed. Everyone was nattering over her in excitement that coming last was working in their favor because they weren't being pushed. That wasn't true. There had to be a downside to coming last, and one that would make Izuku pleased he didn't drop out from the get-go. Midnight slammed her whip onto the ground, creating a crack that earned the much-needed silence. Todoroki Shoto, she explained, who placed first in the qualifier, is worth 10 million points. Everyone looked straight at the boy in question. Todoroki, however, had a perfectly constructed poker face that didn't crumble at the pressure. He looked straight up at the ranking board, scoping out his competition. Izuku also peered up to see his own worth. 200 points was more than he expected, but without a strong team, it was useless on its own. Compared to the winner who didn't even need a group to win, just to coat himself in ice and freeze the competition. Bakugo had a similar issue, and secretly Izuku is pleased. The Pomeranian will have a harder time finding a potential teammate than he will. Kaken never did friends, and he would be more than willing to keep on his own if it wasn't essential to his own worth. With the scores posted up, everyone is peering around, trying to find who to team with instead of eating the winner up as if he were a chicken. Subconsciously, Midoriya is already peeking round to try and catch Uraraka's eyes and agree on a team. He already has Mei in the bag, and Shinsu would rather keep his quirk a secret as long as possible. People shuffle around to creep closer to grip onto their friends. Now, I will explain the rules of the cavalry battle. She pointed up to the screen, which now showed All Might balancing on present Mike, 13, and herself. 3 bubbles had popped up explaining how they all ranked in the qualifier. It matched in how they ranked in the hero ranking, though he assumed that was an Easter egg more than anything. You have a time limit of 15 minutes. Each team is worth the total of its members' points, and riders will wear a headband with that number on their forehead. Teams will try and grab each other's headbands until the time runs out while keeping as many points as they can. Stolen headbands must be worn from the neck up. So the more you steal, the harder it is to manage them. The most important thing is that even if your headband gets stolen or if your team falls, you are not out. Muttering broke out as everyone discussed what that meant. Izuku thought it was simple to understand. There were 12 teams at all times with no chance to get them disqualified. The game was a free-for-all where keeping hidden did you no good. The next rule Midnight went over was expected. During the game, it'll be a cruel fight where you can use your quirks, but it is still a cavalry battle. You get a red card for attacks that are trying to make people fall. You'll be removed instantly. Now, you have 15 minutes to create your teams. She let the silence brew before announcing, "Start." Everyone instantly took 2 directions. Directly to Todoroki or directly away from him. If Izuku wasn't dead set on teaming with his friends, he would have ran away from the heterochronic boy. The odds of him being wanted on his team were slim, but he still didn't want to run that risk. He clung to Mei's arm. "Don't even think of ditching me to advertise your babies better. We'll get the 10 million off him, then see how he reacts. All eyes will be on you and your dead-ass megaphone." That's a high promise to make. "Can you really do that?" Mei asked. "Yeah. I actually have a plan. It's insane, but I need Uraraka in on it," he said, waving towards his friend, "and your babies." Hatsume's face lit up and he knew he had hit the nail on the head. Now the only thing left to do was get Okako on board and hunt down Shinsu. Midoriya had a different plan for him if he chose to join. "Do you have a plan for me?" Shinsu asked, causing Izuku to yelp and flip around to see who had come up from behind him. At the sight of his friend he sagged and nodded. "Yep. Actually, I can't wait to tell you. We need Uraraka first though, because she's going to take a while to get on board with our plan, because most people will want her to join them, seeing as she came in 5th and is a hero student. She's bound to have other friends." He turned round to Mei. "Can you go bags her? Just drag her or something. I don't care how you get her round, but we need her more than anyone else." She nodded and scampered off into the crowds. With the pink-haired madlet out of the way, Izuku turned around to Hitachi and grinned. "You don't want anyone knowing your quirk, do you? That is the desirable outcome of this match," Shinsu said. Izuku could feel himself grin like an idiot, Then it's a good thing we both need our true natures to be a secret, isn't it? I have been told that I am marvelous at mouthing. It's not like anyone here knows what we sound like. Hell, if we're loud enough they might not even notice. I get what you're implying, Shinsu said. A smirk formed on his lip. Confusion works best. Do we tell Hatsum and Eureka about this? Midoriya shook his head. They'll catch on. Anyways, I have one more thing you need to do. That's to make sure you're undetected. No one can know where you are at any time. If Mike picks up on you, come find me. Undetected? Hitachi asked, not fully understanding. His friend however remained unwilling to explain until Eureka had been pulled into the group. He clapped for Hatsum while Okako looked prepared to fight God. She clapped her hands. I'm guessing you have a plan, that Izakun? She questioned. That's what he promised me. Mei said, and we need you so you can't bunk no matter how insane it is. I will not ditch you all. All the teams are made up now anyways. What would the point even be? Good point. Anyways, Eureka, I am assuming you have enough stamina back to make yourself float with the help of Hatsum's working baby. Midoriya asked, twisting his feet in anticipation. Eureka banged her fists together like a monkey. I can try. That's perfect. So, who here noticed one of those rules and what it means? He asked, grinning evilly. Mei nodded, grumbling something her bombs defiantly knocking people off the riders would get them an instant red card. Shinsu elbowed and whispered that he didn't mean that rule. Eureka shook her head. I don't get it. That's fine. What's important is the fact that we don't get disqualified as long as we stay in the arena and don't kick others off on purpose and have the names on our neck for the end part. It never says we can't disband as long as we follow those rules. Oh fuck. Eureka stated while the paces clicked for their other two teammates. I know exactly what we're doing. Where do my babies come in then? We need you, Mei, to make a show. Use up the arena and advertise anything anyone could use. As far as they're aware, you've ditched us. That worked out then. She said. I knew you were going to ditch us. Shinsu yelled, pointing a finger directly at her chest. Yagi Toshinori had full trust in his successor. She hadn't been the first option he had considered, but with his time dwindling and the recent USJ attack confirming his fear that All for One had returned, she was his best bet. There was no better person for the job in the hero class than the girl who had cleaned up the beach to train instead of going to the gym. Her dedication was stronger than most of the year. The only thing holding her back was the quirks of those who placed on the podium. Even then, had her backlash not been so harsh, Yagi believed she would have won. That didn't take away from the mild disappointment he felt grow into a pit when she teamed up with 3 non-hero students. Eureka was a smart kid. She knew she was here to make her first statement as the symbol of peace. Her group didn't reflect that, and that worried him. So far young Todoroki was proving to be the worst threat, the one that could take on his place as a symbol of money. Unlike Toshinori's choice, Endeavor's successor was focused purely on being the best. All Might could see the way he looked down on everyone. That wasn't what the country needed. Japan needed him. Japan needed another Nana Shimura. Yurikaka was supposed to be putting herself out there, but when he saw her run to join the general education students, he worried. He trusted that she knew what she was doing even if he had no clue. The only time a kid from general education got into the final was the year Aizawa Shouda won. The kids she had teamed with did not look like a young Eraserhead. He recognized them. He knew the green-haired kid who came third as the boy who he wanted to train. His first choice, who ran into an attack to save his tormentor, had been crushed by society. He could not be a hero. The second was bright pink-haired and she had ambushed him on day 1. Self-centered was the best way to describe her. She didn't deserve to be in the support course, when she couldn't work for heroes. The third he hadn't met. He hadn't made any sort of statement. Unless he was hiding something impeccable, the kid would make it through as dead weight. They were all dead weight to Eureka in this contest. She couldn't risk being dragged down in a contest built for heroes to show off. Everyone was scouting here and she was throwing her chance away. Yagi wanted to scream. So many hero students wanted to partner with her. Why was she turning them down? He trusted her. Yagi really did, but as she stood there discussing the best course of action with those who couldn't get her the attention and voice she needed, he wasn't so sure. The only way she could twist this in her favor was to claim it was from pity. The need to help people even when it could put her at risk. All Might could work with that. He just needed to get her on board for the future. When people asked, he couldn't have her blowing it. He settled into his seat in the teacher's box as the whistle blowed, symbolizing the beginning of the match. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below. It really helps with the algorithms. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.